All couples have ups and downs, and all relationships bring opportunities to learn, to grow, to work on ourselves. And it's also true that there is a difference between a relationship rough patch that heralds a growth opportunity and a sign that your relationship is really in trouble and might even be on the brink. So, today we're talking about the signs of a genuinely distressed relationship that's really in trouble so that you can see the real warning signs and know what to do to get things back on track. And welcome to another episode of the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. This is for growth oriented people like you who are on a mission to create more love, happiness, and success in their lives. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. I'm the founder of Growing Self Counseling and Coaching. My background, I'm a licensed psychologist, a board certified coach, and I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist. So we talk a lot about love and relationships on this show, and today is going to be one of those. I really wanted to record an episode for you on this topic about how to know if your relationship is really in distress, because there are some unique characteristics of relationships that are really starting to go down the tubes. And it's important to be able to see that and know how to intervene in order to shift that. Because if you don't, unfortunately, I've seen this as a marriage counselor, couples can get to this point of no return, where even if they do get into couples counseling, sometimes even the best marriage counselor in the world can't help them put it back together again. Where on the other side of it, if you do intervene before it gets that bad, with work and with intention, there's so much growth and opportunity that can happen. But I think the hard part for many couples is knowing when it's really time to get help or intentionally make some changes. Because it's also true that there's always turbulence in relationships. There are rough patches, there are growth moments. Ideally, in a perfect world, what couples will do is taking all of those growth moments and being able to use them productively to strengthen and build their relationship and do some important growth work in themselves, because that really is how we grow. It's not despite relationship conflict, it is because of it. So your relationship is always giving you these opportunities to learn more about yourself, understand, your triggers, your patterns, your unconscious, core beliefs that can come up in these relational moments. And so, when we're paying attention to our relationships, we on almost a daily basis have opportunities to understand ourselves differently and continue to grow in service of our love. So hopefully we should always be doing that. And I hope that this podcast supports you in your ability to do that. And it's also true that when we're not doing those things and when small problems start to mushroom into big problems, they can begin to take on a life of their own. And it can start to create damage on a really deeper level in relationships. And when that is happening, it's very important to understand these shifts so that you can, again, respond in a different way and honestly in a more serious way to be able to engage in the growth and healing that will save it. Because, not to be really scary or catastrophic, if you don't, it can often mean the end of a relationship. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but like a year or three from now. Yeah. First of all, it's important to understand the dynamics of distressed relationships and how they're different from relationships that are just going through normal ebbs and flows and growth moments. I will say that in my years as a couples counselor, I have witnessed a particular kind of transformation that takes place when relationships move into really dangerous waters. One of them is a entrenched pattern of displacing blame. It is always common for all of us, myself included, to see their partner as being the one primarily responsible for some relationship problems, and ourselves because we're so intimately connected with our own thoughts and motivations and internal beliefs. Like, it's easy to go into that not my fault kind of role, or that's not what I meant, you're just overreacting kind of place. And this is a natural tendency. I think part of the growth that we all have to do in that kind of normal garden variety relationship growth work is really centered around that taking responsibility for ourselves and understanding how we may be experienced by other people. That's part of the work here. However, when relationships start to get into a dangerous place, it becomes increasingly difficult to do that. It becomes challenging to see anything except how our partner is creating problems, how they're not just behaviors, but actually their character is the core failing. And it's the changes in the relationship itself, oftentimes, that lead to the changes in behavior or way of being that you're seeing in your partner, not inherent character flaws. But when a narrative starts to simmer that tells you things like, this is who they are incapable, maybe they have Asperger's disorder or some kind of attachment thing, or there's like so emotionally stunted from their family of origin, where it becomes this like global thing that your partner is responsible for what is happening in this relationship due to some very deep seated shortcoming or character defect. That is a sign of a highly distressed relationship. Another thing to look out for is related to the characteristics of the kinds of conflict that you're having. And so, just to say, conflict is a natural, normal, and healthy part of every relationship. And so, I think some people think conflict as being like a highly negative thing that needs to be avoided. And that is absolutely not true. We certainly don't want toxic or harmful or unproductive conflict. But really, truly, it's a conflict is simply when people have differences that need to be worked through. There's such a thing as healthy, productive conflict that is absolutely essential to be having in a relationship, because that means you're addressing real issues that every single couple in the history of the world has had to work through. These differences, different ways of being, different expectations, priorities, values. This is the work of becoming united as a couple, is working through these things productively. However, when relationships are really in trouble, the ability to work through conflict productively breaks down. Sometimes the unhealthiest, relationships, a real relationship warning flag for me as a marriage counselor is actually when people stop fighting about things. Obviously, we would hope that conflict is resolved not through arguments and fighting, but in more productive ways generally. But, when it isn't, a couple will go through a cycle where like they're fighting a lot, kind of bumping up against each other. But like there's actually a third phase of that where fighting actually stops. And that's when people have started to believe that it doesn't matter, this isn't going to go well. What's the point of trying to talk about this again? It's just going to be the same old fight, and there is no hope for me that it's going to be different. So I think I'm just going to save my energy. And that is really when a relationship is truly in like real crisis. So if things have been conflictual and nothing has really been resolved and the fighting has stopped, I would encourage you to get real curious around why that might be and consider that it might not be a sign that things are getting better, but actually a sign that one of you might be on an off ramp, like emotionally detaching from the relationship altogether. But even prior to that, if conflict isn't able to be resolved, you're not able to come to any agreements or make any changes through having these dialogues, unresolved issues start to pile up, and which leads to resentment, right? Problems are still there. And you might also see one partner becoming the pursuer, like expressing their complaints, things that they're unhappy about, trying to fix the relationship, while the other person is withdrawing, stonewalling, getting defensive, not able to stay in the ring to address a conflict. I recently recorded another podcast on this dynamic as its own thing. It's called Breaking the Pursuer Withdrawer Pattern, or I think I called it the Pursuer Distancer Pattern. And you might want to scroll back through my podcast feed to listen to that one if that feels familiar for you. But this is just one of the kinds of dynamics that can start to happen that makes it feel almost impossible to work through things productively. And many distressed relationships start to fall into that pattern. So that's a sign that, you're not going into a positive trajectory if you notice that kind of pattern happening frequently. And that in itself can be a crucial sign that some kind of intervention, like high quality couples counseling, is needed. However, an even more serious danger sign is if you have been in that kind of dynamic, and then, like, even the person who had been upset and pursuing isn't doing that anymore. That's a sign that you guys are really in trouble. So I don't want to be frightening or certainly to be hopeless, but really I'm sharing these things so that you understand when real action is required. But, really the core thing and the thing that I'm listening for when I'm working with a couple as a marriage counselor is, what is the narrative that these people are telling themselves about the relationship and about the sources of the problem? In couples that are having a rough patch, a growth moment, they are able to contextualize what is happening in the relationship and be able to say, things started to feel hard for us when we had our second child, or when she took a different job, or when we moved. Like, they can see systemic forces at work that create pressure in the relationship, which is really valid, because as we go through different chapters of our lives, becoming parents or taking a job with more responsibility, or even just kind of advancing in our lives, being able to manage it all, like a relationship and kids and jobs and a house and a social life and all the things, those things always challenge us to grow and work on ourselves, so that as our lives get more complex, we are developing into the kinds of people who can manage it all, which creates its own stress, which in turn can impact a relationship. Additionally, as relationships evolve, we are called to increase our capacity to be loving, to be lovable, to be good partners, to figure out how to communicate about things in a constructive way, how to solve problems together. I mean, because relationships have different phases, right? A dating relationship where you're hanging out because you enjoy each other's company is a totally different relationship when you fast forward 10 years and you're trying to, build a life together, which calls for just so many different parts of yourself, right? And so to be able to understand what the cause of the conflict is, and to see it as part of your journey, this developmental journey as people and as a couple, that is a hugely protective thing for couples because there's hope there. We can say, okay, you know what? This is a different phase of life we're in now. I think we need to, work some things out, create different agreements. Yeah, who is actually in charge of getting the kids to school or unloading the dishwasher? Or how do we, maintain our time together as a couple? Or, maintain a relationship that has space for sexual intimacy. Like those aren't things that just happen. Every couple has to figure that out. But couples who are going through a growth moment are able to recognize the problem as being a solvable problem. If we can figure this out, if we can make these changes, we're going to come back together again stronger than ever before. In contrast, a couple that didn't do that work, right? They missed the growth opportunity. Things didn't get better. They continued to get worse and drift apart. These negative narratives really start to build up. And it's even over and above just like blaming your partner for things and instead of, reflecting on, yeah, I could probably do this differently too. It turns into these narratives where people start to actually question each other's intentions and like that they perceive their partner as even being intentionally hurtful or unkind or cruel to them. And that becomes a significant barrier to resolving issues because of how the trust is damaged. People begin to believe that their partner is like out to get them a little bit. Not we're on the same team going through something hard. It is, I don't trust you to be an emotionally safe person, to care about me, to pull your own weight in this relationship. I feel like your way of being is actively harming me. And when any of us go into that place, when we experience ourselves as being under threat or even abused, by another person, it can be very difficult to bring out our best and maintain empathy or compassion for somebody that we really perceive as causing harm for us in an active way. And so at these points, tensions really escalate. Conversations will immediately spiral into sometimes very toxic arguments because we have these core beliefs about who each other is. And because of these negative experiences, then this reinforces the negative perceptions because, let's face it, when any of us are in a really nasty fight, we are not being our best selves. And we're showing our partner that, yeah, we can be cruel and impatient and unkind and critical and inappropriately angry or even like saying really mean things. And then that's how we are experienced, which reinforces this narrative. And so when this starts to take hold, it becomes a predictable cycle of, it just keeps getting worse. And if you are experiencing any of that in your relationship, that is a real danger sign for the future of your relationship. It has to be corrected and swiftly if there's a future here for the two of you. And so, examples of this, how it sounds, these thoughts, if you found yourself thinking things like, if your partner brings something up that they're upset about, she's crazy. She's unreasonable. There's no point in even talking to her. She's just, it's always something to be characterized by this eye roll, right? There is this core belief that you're with an unreasonable person, so it doesn't matter anyway. It's like draining the legitimacy out of their needs, rights, or feelings. Or if you're saying things to yourself like, he just wants me to feel bad. He doesn't care at all. He's trying to be hurtful to me. Otherwise, why would he be behaving this way? That's something that I hear a lot. Other narratives, she's just trying to control me, can be one. particularly if you are distancing in a relationship and there's a relationship dynamic where your partner is working really hard to try to like get you to come back into the ring and be what feels like an equal partner, a present partner. If you're experiencing that as being controlled, that could be a sign that you're really like it's going down the drain. I don't know. Maybe she is trying to control you. Maybe this is like a actual power and control dynamic. But people who are in highly distressed relationships will experience that. Um, Great reason to take this in front of a very competent marriage and family therapist to lay it all out, both sides, and get their assistance in trying to sort out what is really going on. Maybe your partner is trying to control you inappropriately. Maybe they are also trying to have a relationship with you that you are interpreting as being highly negative when it actually isn't. So those are some of the things that you want to pay attention to, not what's happening in the relationship, but what is happening inside of you, what you are telling yourself about what the relational experiences mean is highly significant when it comes to these things. But so, when these narratives are brewing and you are feeling like, your partner doesn't think highly of you. I mean, if you have somebody on the other side of this relationship who is telling themselves those things about you, she's crazy. He just wants me to feel bad. She's just trying to control me. He doesn't care about me. Like on the other side of that, that does not feel good. You can tell that your partner doesn't like you. They are not giving you the benefit of the doubt. Anything that you do is interpreted in like the most negative way possible. And then that in itself really damages trust, You stop wanting to give your partner the benefit of the doubt, or be gracious, or be generous, or be kind to them if they are putting that kind of energy into the relationship. And so, as you can see, these negative narratives just reinforce each other, and it just turns into the spiral to the bottom. Another thing that you can experience when this is happening, that sometimes actually happens sooner in this cycle that can really cause some of the things that we're talking about, is this deepening sense of emotional disconnection. When people begin to feel emotionally unsafe with each other, or when there's unresolved conflict, or when communication starts to feel very, very difficult, it becomes increasingly hard to be emotionally intimate and sexually intimate, but like there's this realness that gets lost. Partners stop sharing their deeper thoughts and feelings. They start just closing down a little bit. Maybe there's still conversation about day to day, how was work? Yeah, the kids need to be picked up, blah, blah, blah. But they're not really talking about how they feel, or their hopes and their dreams, or their vulnerabilities, or how they really feel about you, right? There's this guardedness that happens. It's just, growing emotional disconnection. And the relationship starts to feel empty. When people stop being vulnerable and authentic, there aren't opportunities to give and receive emotional support. And it can start to feel like roommates just going through the motions a little bit, with the good times being this distant memory. And this is a bind, because a lot of times in the situation, when people do open up and start talking about how they really feel, those can be challenging conversations because they don't feel good. These are courageous conversations to have. They are the conversations that will ultimately save your relationship if they are handled in an appropriate way, or, ideally with the support of a really good couples therapist who can help you talk honestly and authentically about how you're really feeling. But I think in the context of a distressed relationship, it feels unsafe to go there. It feels like, if I talked about how I was really feeling right now, it would just turn into a fight. And I don't want to have another fight. So I'm just going to say please and thank you and pass the salt and turn on the TV is what happens. So again, These are all symptoms of a relationship that is really getting into danger territory. But I think the most striking thing that happens, and what, from my perspective as a marriage counselor, sitting with couples sounds like the death rattle, like all the stuff that we've been talking about can really potentially be solvable problems if there's intervention that happens early enough. These things can be addressed and corrected. But what really becomes problematic, even like, if you came and talked to me about it, if hope and trust have been damaged to the point that, even one, but sometimes both people just don't believe that change is possible, it can be very, very difficult to find a way back to a healthy and satisfying relationship because of the damage that has been done. And at those points, it can feel like ending the relationship is the only option. With hope dying, which sounds like it doesn't matter, it'll never change. Or if like the attachment has been damaged to the point where even if people are like, well, now he's saying the right things and he's doing the right things, but why did I have to work so hard? Why was it that it wasn't until we were in front of a marriage counselor that he finally got his act together? I don't trust him to not do this to me again. And I don't know if, knowing what I know now, I want to reconnect with this person. That can also be the way it sounds. Under those circumstances, marriage counseling, like what we think about as traditional marriage counseling or couples therapy, is not going to be effective. And if you try couples counseling at that point, it can actually make things worse instead of better, because one person, sometimes both, but usually one, is really no longer committed to the relationship in the same way. To repair a relationship that is in distress, it requires a lot of work. It requires growth work on both sides. And somebody has to want to do that. So, not all hope is lost. Even at this point, there is another kind of intervention. It's a type of counseling or even coaching called discernment counseling or discernment coaching. And the purpose of this kind of couples work is not to repair the relationship and do the things that would make it better. The outcome of this kind of counseling is to decide whether or not it is possible to do that work. I recorded a podcast on this topic that you can find in my feed, or if you go to growingself.com, go to the blog and podcast section, go into the love collection. And from there, I actually have an entire content collection that I've curated for you. It's all about relationship clarity for couples on the brink. So there's all kinds of informational articles about what to do in these moments. And you'll also find that podcast about discernment counseling right there too, so you can learn more about it. This is a brief type of counseling or coaching that your counselor will spend time with each of you on each side to talk about what would need to happen in order for this to be better, and how motivated are you to do this work at all. And sometimes the answer is, okay, we know what the problem is, and we're both committed to working really hard for the next 3 months to see what's possible for us. But sometimes the outcome of this work is, I want to work on this, and I just don't have it in me, which can really be a blessing in disguise. I mean, to have that kind of clarity and know that, there's no point in trying to do couples counseling. It's just going to be a waste of time and money. Let's now work on rebuilding potentially a different kind of relationship. Maybe we can, especially if you have kids together, develop a new positive chapter for the two of us as co-parents. We'll still be family. What do we want that to look like? Because if you enter into couples counseling without having clarified whether or not you're both committed to doing the work, it will be very frustrating, and marriage counseling will fail because you're not on the same page about working on the relationship in the first place. So I just wanted to offer that so that you know what to do if you're in that place. So, of course, just learn more about it. Growingself.com. There's the content collection, or you can also just learn more about discernment counseling services. We have that in there too. So, what to do? We talked about what to do if like hope has been lost. However, if you're thinking that, okay, I can see we're in this downward spiral, but neither of us are in this super hopeless place, that's a good sign. That's a good sign. And it means that, the thing to do at this point is get really good intervention. And I'll tell you, working with a very skilled, licensed marriage and family therapist who practices evidence based forms of marriage and family therapy is crucial, and doing that sooner rather than later. I will tell you that couples in this situation often have one shot of having couples counseling work. It feels kind of like a Hail Mary pass. And one of the things that makes me just so sad, quite frankly, is that there's not a lot of understanding in the world about the differences between different kinds of therapists and what kind of therapist to go to for which problem. So, for example, I am a licensed psychologist as well as a licensed marriage and family therapist. And as a psychologist, I learned how to diagnose and treat mental health conditions. And I know how to do that as a psychologist. As a psychologist, I learned almost nothing about marriage and family systems and how to work with relational dynamics in order to resolve relationship problems. That came from a completely different degree and a different training process in order for me to develop those skills and abilities. Most therapists offering couples counseling are not marriage and family therapists. Like 95% of therapists are like, yeah, I'll do couples counseling with you, in my opinion, do not have the skills or the training or the experience to really know what to do with couples, especially when they're in this kind of distressed place. Because telling you to have date nights or like use your I statements is not going to cut it. And it makes me so sad when people will just, wander into a basic therapist for couples counseling in one of these crisis moments, not understanding that this person might not know how to help them. So they do couples counseling. It predictably doesn't work. And then the narrative becomes, well, we've tried everything. We even did couples counseling. It failed. Therefore, there is no hope for us. And they wind up getting divorced when, if they had gone to see a true expert who would have had a greater capacity to help them work through this in a productive way, they could have rebuilt their relationship and gone into not just a new chapter of their marriage, but really like work through a lot of old stuff so that they are in a stronger, happier, healthier place than they were ever in before. So it's vital that you get the right kind of help in moments like these. And as you can tell, I'm extremely passionate about this because, I've just worked with so many people, who honestly come to me for individual work. Like now they're going through a breakup or they're going through a divorce and they want me to help them get through that, which I'm happy to do. But when I listen to their story, I hear that they didn't get the help that they needed in their relationship. And that just makes me feel so sad. So that has kind of become a mission for me on just educating the public around what to do instead. I have put together a whole knowledge base just to put out into the world for free to try to help people just know the landscape and make informed decisions. If you would like to access that, please come to my website. It's growingself.com. There's a whole section with free resources. It's right on the top of the main nav. Click on it. You'll find how to choose a good marriage counselor, how to find a good marriage counselor. And I laid it all out. So, the qualifications to look for, also the questions to be asking as you're evaluating marriage counselors. So it's not just just that they have a degree, but what is your experience in helping people navigate this kind of situation? What's your track record? And what kinds of modalities do you employ in order to help your clients get better results and heal their relationships? And so, what you're listening for are evidence based forms of couples and family therapy. So, things like the Gottman method, emotionally focused couples therapy, and there are others. But when you are interviewing a prospective marriage counselor, you need to be asking these kinds of questions based on what we're telling you. How would you help us? And if they're not giving you a coherent answer that makes sense in response to this, like, okay, the first thing we would do is, an assessment, and then we would work on this, and then here's what would happen. If you're not hearing that and they're saying like just kind of vague things like, well, it sounds like you have a lot to process, each of you. And so I'll be holding the space and that kind of thing. They might not know how to help you. So I just want you to be informed so that you can make really empowered decisions, especially if your relationship is truly in crisis. So, marriage and family therapist with a deep understanding of relationship systems who uses evidence-based practices. And the good news is that change is possible at any of these stages with the right kind of support. I have personally worked with so many couples who have come into my office in this, like, I don't know, space and worked through so many important things, not just, the dynamics of communication and relational patterns, but really had the opportunity to go even deeper into the things that started to cause so much distress in their relationship that they never had the opportunity to work through productively before. And this doesn't just repair the relationship, it really creates transformation in both people. They are both growing and evolving and maturing and really like developing into these people because of working on the relationship. And I think that's true in any of us work on our relationships. It really requires us to be working on ourselves. I know that has certainly been my experience in my own marriage. And it's such a beautiful opportunity to do that. And when our relationships are in trouble, there's a lot of motivation to do that deep work on ourselves with our partner in service of our love and of our family and of our shared life together. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that can come out of this. And you can absolutely not just restore love and trust and satisfaction, but really build something that was better than it ever had been before. So don't lose hope. So I know we talked about many things and that wraps it up, but I so hope that you found this helpful and especially just like, knowing, okay, this isn't just a blip. We need to work on this. And also just like providing direction around how to get meaningful help in these moments of crisis. So of course, if you would like to speak with me or any of the other marriage and family therapists on my team here at Growing Self, you're so welcome to do that. You can come to my website, request a free consultation, and also take advantage, please, of all the free resources that I have available for you. You can take my How Healthy is Your Relationship quiz by yourself or with your partner. It's totally free. You'll find it on my website. And that can even be a really cool way, like if you both take it together, to, talk about your responses to that. Use it as a constructive way to talk about what's going on in your relationship and to broach, what you would each like to have be different, which could be the starting point of building something new. I also have so many other podcasts that I've made for you, of course, some of which I'd mentioned today, but you can also find articles that I've written, that my colleagues have written on our website, growingself.com. Just come to the blog and podcast section and you'll tap on the Love collection and then browse around to see the topics that are of most interest to you. And again, if it's really a crisis moment, you'll find more in the relationship clarity section on discernment counseling or, how to know when to call it quits versus times that there's still hope for your relationship. It is all there for you.